On Mother's Day, my daughter handed her mother-in-law a diamond ring worth $20,000 and cruise tickets to the Mediterranean. I got a $5 plastic trinket. You think that's just about money? Oh, it was a message. A brutal, deliberate message. But here's the part they didn't expect. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. What I did next changed everything. Stay with me. And if you've ever been quietly replaced in someone's life, share your story in the comments. You're not invisible here. The morning sunlight streamed softly through the kitchen window, touching the edge of the table I'd wiped down the night before. I had set out the good mugs, ceramic ones with floral patterns, just in case they decided to stay for coffee. My daughter always liked the blue one. I wasn't sure if she remembered that anymore. It was Mother's Day, and like every year I tried to keep my hopes small, manageable, contained in a little box of realism. But no matter how many times I told myself not to expect much, something inside me still stirred. A part of me, maybe the part that had raised her alone, hoped for something different. Something a little softer this time. I had woken up early not because anyone asked me to, but because I always did. It was habit, I suppose, years of preparing, of planning, of making sure others felt seen and special. Today was supposed to be my turn. Not for grand gestures. Just a little effort. A little acknowledgement. I made cinnamon rolls even though the recipe still confused me. My hands moved from memory, measuring, stirring, rolling the dough with fingers that had once buttoned her tiny coats and braided her long hair before school. As they baked, I stood near the stove remembering past Mother's Days. The ones when she was little, when she'd hand me homemade cards with glitter that never quite stayed on the page, smile wide and proud as she yelled, "Happy Mother's Day," while holding a flower picked from the neighbor's yard. Those years, even with all their mess and struggle, felt full. Now, I couldn't remember the last time I saw that kind of excitement in her eyes. For me, when the knock came at the door, I wiped my hands on a towel, heart fluttering. Not in fear. In anticipation. She arrived with her husband, Sam, who nodded politely but didn't meet my eyes for long. Behind them, her mother-in-law, Janet, followed with a bright smile and confident step, like she belonged here more than I did. That wasn't new. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," my daughter said, hugging me briefly. Her scent was different. More perfume, less warmth. "Thanks, sweetheart," I replied, hugging her back tightly even if she didn't do the same. I invited them in, gestured toward the kitchen. The cinnamon rolls were still warm. I had arranged everything just so. Napkins, fresh orange juice, a little vase of daisies from the yard. Janet beamed as she sat down. "Smells amazing in here," she said. "You've outdone yourself." I nodded, polite. I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a placeholder. As we settled in, the energy in the room shifted. My daughter seemed jittery, excited in a way that had nothing to do with me. She glanced at her husband, then reached for a velvet box on the counter. "I just want to do this now," she said. I couldn't wait. She turned to Janet and opened the box. Inside was a ring. Not just a nice ring. A massive, sparkling, breathtaking diamond ring. The kind you only saw in commercials or passed down through generations. "And," she said, pulling out a white envelope, "we're sending you on a cruise. The Mediterranean one you've been dreaming about." Janet gasped. "Oh my goodness. Are you serious?" Her daughter nodded, eyes gleaming. "You deserve it." They hugged long and tight. Sam clapped lightly, beaming. I sat frozen in my chair, my hands curled around the warm ceramic mug. I didn't speak. Couldn't. And then, as if realizing something, my daughter turned to me and said, "Oh, I got you something too." She reached into a crinkled paper bag by her purse and handed me a small package. No ribbon. No card. I opened it slowly. Inside was a plastic garden figurine. One of those novelty items with googly eyes and a smiley face that said, "You're the best," on its belly. I stared at it. She laughed awkwardly. I thought it was cute. "You like gnomes, right?" I nodded, feeling the heat rush to my face. "Thank you," I said quietly. She didn't notice the way my fingers trembled. Or maybe she did and chose to ignore it. The rest of the visit blurred. I smiled when I needed to. Laughed when expected. Watched as they talked about cruise options, ring resizing, and itinerary details. I cleared the plates, washed the dishes, and wrapped the leftover cinnamon rolls for them to take home. Janet thanked me again, called the brunch lovely, and gave me a polite kiss on the cheek. They left in a swirl of perfume and plans. And I stood in the doorway holding a plastic gnome in one hand, watching them disappear down the driveway. Alone. The silence returned. But this time it wasn't gentle. It was sharp. Cutting. I placed the gnome on the windowsill. And for the first time in a long while I sat down and let the stillness swallow me whole. I kept staring at the gnome long after they left. It sat on the windowsill like some cruel joke, its plastic smile mocking me with its wide eyes and cheap charm. I turned it around so its face faced the wall, but it didn't help. The damage had already been done. I walked back to the kitchen and began cleaning, not because it was messy but because I needed something to do with my hands. The smell of cinnamon still lingered in the air, too sweet, too full of effort for what had just happened. The image of that ring wouldn't leave my mind. The way my daughter's eyes lit up as she handed it over. The way Janet's hands trembled as she tried it on, pretending to act modest when everyone in the room could see she was glowing with satisfaction. The applause, the laughter, the sheer joy of the moment. None of it included me. I was there. I witnessed it. But I wasn't part of it. I had watched my daughter become someone else's child right in front of me. She used to hold my hand on Mother's Day. I used to wake up to breakfast in bed, crafted with peanut butter and banana smiles on toast. I used to find hand-drawn cards taped to the bathroom mirror, covered in glitter and crooked hearts. When she was little, she'd save her allowance to buy me a single flower from the gas station. I cherished those moments not because of the things but because of the meaning behind them. But now she gave her warmth, her generosity, her love to another woman. And all I got was something that looked like it came from a clearance bin at the checkout aisle. I replayed it all in my head. The lead-up, the delivery, the moment Janet opened the box and gasped, and the way my daughter reached for her hands, like it was the most important bond in her life. I tried to remember if she'd ever looked at me that way. Lately she mostly looked through me. What cut the deepest wasn't the money. It wasn't the $20,000 ring or the luxury cruise. It was the effort. The thought. The planning. The intimacy of it all. You don't spend that kind of time and money on someone unless you truly want to. She didn't have to do it. He wanted to. And she didn't want to do anything like that for me. I kept scrubbing the sink, tears welling up but refusing to fall. I told myself it was silly, that I was being dramatic, that maybe she didn't mean it the way it felt. But the more I tried to reason through it, the more it stung. She had made a choice. A very public, very deliberate choice. I dried my hands and walked to the living room. The wrapping paper Janet had left behind sat crumpled near the chair. I picked it up, running my fingers over the smooth, glossy surface. It was thick, elegant paper, cream with golden swirls, tied with satin ribbon. Even the wrapping had dignity. The gnome had come in a clear plastic bag with a barcode sticker still half attached. I sat down on the couch, the silence around me deafening. It wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence of emptiness. I had never realized how heavy silence could feel when it was full of things left unsaid. I tried to imagine what it must feel like to receive a gift like that ring. To know someone saved, planned, and personalized something just for you. To feel that seen. That celebrated. That loved. And then I wondered when the last time was that my daughter made me feel any of those things. I couldn't remember. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 20 minutes. Maybe 2 hours. Time seemed to stretch and fold in on itself. I heard the hum of the fridge. The distant bark of a neighbor's dog. The rustle of trees outside. But nothing grounded me. I felt like I was floating in someone else's life, watching my own slowly fade into the background. Eventually, I stood up and walked to the small drawer in the hallway where I kept old cards. I pulled out a bundle tied together with twine, cards from years past, yellowed at the edges but still full of color. Her handwriting was different then. Rounder. Messy. Innocent. To the best mom ever. I love you more than ice cream. You're my superhero. I ran my fingers over the words, letting them blur through the tears that finally came. What had changed? Was it something I did? Something I failed to do? Or was this just what happens when your children grow up and build new lives, with new allegiances, new priorities, new love? I wasn't sure if I wanted the answer. All I knew was that something inside me had shifted. I couldn't keep pretending it didn't hurt. That I didn't notice. That I wasn't bleeding inside every time I was reminded that I had become optional. She had given her heart to another mother. And I had been left with a plastic smile that couldn't hide the truth anymore. I smiled. That was the first betrayal. Not from them but from me. When she handed me the bag and I reached inside and pulled out that ridiculous gnome, I smiled. I said, "Thank you," in a voice I didn't recognize. It was small, scratchy, like it had to squeeze through a throat full of shattered glass. But I said it. I nodded. I smiled. I did everything a grateful mother was supposed to do. I didn't let my hand tremble when I held it up. I didn't let my face fall when they turned their attention back to Janet and her ring, now catching the light like it was meant to blind me. And in that moment, I realized how well practiced I'd become at pretending I wasn't hurt. I laughed when they laughed. I nodded when they made comments about travel insurance and stateroom upgrades. I passed the rolls. I asked Janet if she needed more tea. I even complimented her ring as if I hadn't just been publicly discarded. As if I hadn't just been told without words but loud and clear who mattered more. My daughter didn't even notice. She had no idea that the smile on my face was paper thin. She couldn't see the corners pulling tight, the way my jaw clenched just enough to keep the tears from spilling. She didn't look long enough to see the storm brewing behind my eyes. Or maybe she did see, and decided it wasn't worth acknowledging. That's what hurt most. Not the gift itself. Not even the ring or the cruise. But the fact that she saw me and chose to keep going. She saw my silence and decided to fill it with celebration for someone else. After they left and I sat alone with my cooling coffee and the plastic gnome grinning up at me from the windowsill, my smile finally cracked. It didn't break all at once. It started with my lips. They quivered slightly before retreating. Then my cheeks fell. My eyes, once wide in performance, began to dull. The mask slipped slowly, like peeling away a layer of skin. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a woman who had just hosted a lovely brunch. My hair was still pinned back, my blouse only slightly wrinkled. I looked fine. But my eyes, they told the real story. They were rimmed in red, wide with disbelief. And in them I saw a question that scared me. Why wasn't I enough? That question haunted me for days. I wore the smile again when I ran into neighbors. When someone asked if my daughter had done anything special for Mother's Day, I said, "Oh yes, we had a beautiful brunch at my place." That was true. I just didn't say who the guest of honor was. I didn't say I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning up the dishes they left behind, or that I cried into a towel on my bathroom floor so I wouldn't have to hear the sound of my own sobs echoing in the hall. I smiled when I went to the store the next day, walking past aisles still filled with "World's Best Mom" mugs and heart-shaped frames. I even smiled at the cashier when she asked, "Did you have a nice Mother's Day?" And I said, "Yes. It was lovely." And then I walked to my car and sat behind the wheel with my hands in my lap, trying to remember how I got there. The smile, once a reflex, now felt like a betrayal every time I used it. But I couldn't stop. Smiling made other people comfortable. Smiling kept the questions at bay. Smiling let me survive. But the cost of that smile grew heavier each day. I found myself avoiding my daughter's calls. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't know how to speak without crying. I didn't trust my voice. I didn't trust myself not to ask the questions that had started nesting in my chest like birds with sharp claws. What did I do wrong? When did I stop being your mother? How long have you felt nothing for me? Instead, I buried myself in routines. I folded laundry I didn't care about. Cleaned windows that weren't dirty. Rearranged cabinets that hadn't needed rearranging in years. I stayed busy because stillness was dangerous. Stillness meant I had to think. Stillness meant I had to feel. And stillness meant facing the truth, that somewhere along the way my daughter had put someone else in my place. And I had let her. I started watching old home videos. Ones I hadn't seen in years. Ones where she was little again, where she ran into my arms after her school play, where she fell asleep on my shoulder on the couch, where she whispered, "I love you," with sticky fingers and sleepy eyes. I watched those clips on repeat as if I could reverse time, as if I could go back and fix something I didn't know was broken. I memorized the way she used to look at me. The way her whole face lit up when I entered the room. I clung to that image because the woman who stood in my kitchen on Mother's Day hadn't looked at me that way in years. She looked past me now. Through me. Like I was just another item in the background. I didn't sleep well that week. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. heart pounding, remembering her voice. "You like gnomes, right?" And I'd wonder if that was her version of a joke. A way to brush off the guilt. Or if she genuinely thought that $5 figurine was enough for me. Enough to honor everything I'd done, everything I'd been. I started journaling again. Not because I had answers but because I needed a place to pour the ache. I wrote down every moment I could remember of raising her. Every milestone. Every birthday party. Every midnight fever I soothed. I needed to remind myself that I was her mother. That my role had been real. That my love had mattered even if she had forgotten. The smile returned again the next time I saw her. She came over to drop off something she borrowed months ago. A casserole dish. She handed it to me with a casual thanks again, as if nothing had happened. As if Mother's Day had been just another day. I smiled. I said, "Of course." And I watched her leave again, carefree and unaware. But this time the smile didn't stay. The moment the door shut, it cracked wide open. And for the first time I let it. Because I was tired of pretending I wasn't hurt. And I was done smiling through heartbreak I didn't deserve. It's strange watching your child love someone else the way you always hoped they'd love you. I used to think it would feel like pride, like seeing them blossom into someone generous, capable of connection. But when that love is handed so freely to someone who isn't you, when it's lavished on another woman while you sit quietly on the sidelines, it doesn't feel like pride. It feels like being erased in real time. That's what it's been like watching her with Janet. At first I told myself I was imagining things. That it was just newness, a kind of excitement that would settle with time. Of course she wanted to impress her mother-in-law. Of course she wanted to be accepted into that family. I understood that. I tried to be supportive. But now I can't unsee the patterns. I can't unfeel what it's like to be the second choice in my own daughter's life. They talk daily. I know this not because she tells me, but because she's mentioned plans with Janet offhandedly, assuming I already knew. We're trying that new Thai place she loves. I'm helping her pick out a new rug. We've got a spa day planned. I hear these comments and smile, always smile, while something inside me folds smaller and smaller each time. I don't get those calls. I don't get invited to spa days. I get update texts. I get photos of things that already happened. I get leftovers, emotionally and otherwise. I remember when she first started dating Sam. She brought him over for dinner, nervous but glowing. I cooked her favorite pasta, lit candles, tried to make the evening special. She sat beside me in the kitchen as I stirred the sauce, stealing spoonfuls and laughing. That version of her felt so close then. She was still mine in the way daughters are before they belong to someone else's life. Back then she called me first when things went wrong. She cried in my arms when she didn't get the job. She brought me flowers just because. But something shifted once Janet entered the picture. Slowly, subtly, like a curtain being drawn between us 1 inch at a time. Janet is everything I'm not, at least in my daughter's eyes. She's polished. She hosts wine nights with matching cheese boards. He has expensive taste, confidence, charm. He posts selfies with my daughter, captioned with inside jokes and matching emojis. They call each other besties, and tag themselves in brunch photos. I don't remember the last time my daughter posted a photo with me. I try not to let those things matter. But they do. Of course they do. It's not that I want to compete. I don't want to win some unspoken contest. I just want to matter. I want to be remembered not out of obligation but out of desire. I want to be seen again by the girl I raised, the girl who used to draw me pictures of the two of us holding hands under rainbows. I still have one of those drawings in a box upstairs. She must have been 5. She colored my dress purple, my favorite color, and drew hearts all around it. I found it a few weeks ago while looking for something else, and when I held it in my hands my breath caught. I ran my fingers over the faded crayon lines, trying to remember what it felt like to be that loved. I tried to get close again. I invited her to a small dinner I was planning, just us. She said she was busy that night but would let me know when she had time. 2 days later I saw a picture of her and Janet at a local restaurant. Same night. Same time. She hadn't forgotten. She'd chosen. I didn't say anything. I just let the moment pass. I've let so many pass. But each one leaves a mark. Sometimes I wonder if Janet even realizes what she's taken. I don't think she's malicious. I think she's simply enjoyed being adored. Who wouldn't? It must feel good to be chosen by someone else's child, to receive their devotion and attention, to be showered with love that was never yours to begin with. Maybe she doesn't know. Or maybe she does. Maybe she's known all along and decided it wasn't her responsibility to step back. Maybe she likes the crown too much to hand it over. I remember standing in my kitchen once, watching through the window as my daughter helped Janet out of the car. They were laughing. Their arms were full of shopping bags. She looked light in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. She had that same face she used to have when she came home from school with good news. And for a moment I imagined she was coming up the walkway to see me. That the bags were filled with things she picked out because they reminded her of us. That she would walk in and say, "I saw this and thought of you." But she didn't come in. She waved from the driveway and drove off. It's not just that she loves Janet. It's that she doesn't seem to remember that I existed first. That before the fancy gifts and cruises, there were scraped knees I kissed, nightmares I soothed, endless days of giving without asking for anything in return. I was her first everything. First protector. First teacher. First cheerleader. And now I'm not even a footnote. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like to ask her why. To look her in the eye and say, "What does she give you that I didn't?" But I'm afraid of the answer. I'm afraid she'd say something honest. Something that would make it impossible for me to keep pretending this was just a phase. So instead I smile. I nod. I watch from a distance as she pours her love into someone else and pray that one day she remembers what it felt like to be mine. There's a strange kind of silence that settles in your chest when you realize you've become invisible to someone you helped bring into the world. It's not loud. It doesn't crash over you like grief. It creeps in like fog, slowly dimming the edges of everything you thought was certain. That's how it's felt with my daughter over the past year. Like I'm fading from the frame of her life while another woman takes center stage. Not with cruelty. Not with violence. But with such quiet certainty that it almost seems natural. Almost. I used to think our bond was unbreakable. There were moments, so many of them, when she was small and clung to me like I was her whole world. Nights she curled up in my lap after a bad dream, mornings she climbed into my bed just to talk. I was her constant. Her compass. She used to write me notes and leave them around the house. Little things like, "You're the best mom," or "Don't forget you're loved." I found one last month tucked into an old wallet in my drawer. It was a post-it faded with a heart and her name in the corner. I stared at it for a long time, wondering how something so small could carry so much weight. Now she calls Janet Mama J. The first time I heard it I flinched. She said it so naturally in passing like it was a nickname she'd always had for her. I smiled, of course. Always do. But that word, Mama, used to belong to me. I earned it. Through scraped knees, broken hearts, and years of carrying more than I ever let her see. I wore it like armor, like a badge. And hearing it now, gifted so freely to someone else, felt like being erased with a single syllable. I started noticing other small things too. Like how she consults Janet on decisions before me. How she shares stories with her that I hear secondhand. How she'll text her pictures of new dresses or furniture and ask for her opinion, then show me the purchase days later, already decided. I've become the afterthought. The one she loops in for politeness, not connection. And it stings. Not because I need to control her choices, but because I want to feel like I still matter in her world. We used to talk every day. Sometimes twice. Now days go by without a word. And when she does call, it's often out of obligation. I can hear it in her voice, the way she rushes through the updates, how she ends with, "Well, I should get going," before I've even said half of what I wanted to share. It's like she's checking a box. Like I've become a task she needs to complete rather than someone she wants to talk to. It's in those moments that the ties feel invisible. I know they're there, I can feel them, but they're no longer visible to her. Like threads she cut without noticing, while I stand here clutching the frayed ends, wondering what I did wrong. I've tried to bridge the gap. I've invited her for quiet weekends, offered to help around her house, even suggested planning a getaway just the two of us. Something we used to dream about when she was younger. Each time there's a reason it can't work. He's too busy. Sam's schedule is packed. Janet already planned something. There's always something. And I always nod. I always say, of course. Another time. Even though deep down I know there won't be another time. Not one that includes just me. The hardest part isn't the rejection itself. It's the slow realization that I've been replaced without a single conversation. That no one sat me down and said, "This is changing. This happened." Like the way a room slowly darkens as the sun sets, and you don't notice until you're sitting in the pitch black, wondering when the light disappeared. Sometimes I question myself. I wonder if I was too much. If I held on too tightly. If maybe I loved her so loudly that she needed somewhere quieter to breathe. I think back to the hard years. When it was just the two of us, when I worked late shifts and came home to find her asleep at the kitchen table waiting for me. I wonder if those years tired her out. If my sacrifice became a shadow instead of a foundation. I wonder if Janet feels easier to love simply because she came without the history. But then I remind myself I gave my all. I showed up. Every recital. Every tear. Every milestone. I was there. I didn't do it perfectly. But I did it with everything I had. Now I live in the quiet space she left behind. I fill it with books, long walks, quiet conversations with friends who've seen the same thing happen in their own families. I listen to stories from other mothers who felt the shift, who know the weight of being forgotten in favor of someone new. It helps to know I'm not alone. That this pain isn't just mine. But it doesn't make it easier. Because every time I see them together, laughing, bonding, sharing a moment that could have been ours, I feel that invisible thread tighten around my chest. A silent reminder of the love that once tethered us so tightly, now loosened to the point of unraveling. And I wonder how much further it can stretch before it finally breaks. There are things I've never told her. Not because I didn't want her to know, but because that's the nature of motherhood. So much of what we give stays invisible. It's in the early mornings we wake before the rest of the world, not for ourselves but for them. It's in the dinners we cook even when we're too tired to eat, the birthdays we plan with money we don't have, the lies we tell ourselves that it's okay to always come last. I gave her everything. Not all at once but piece by piece. I gave her my youth, my time, my health, my dreams. And I did it without asking for anything in return because I believed that love, real love, wasn't a transaction. It was a promise. When she was born I was 23, scared and unprepared. Her father was long gone by the time she took her first breath, and it was just me in that hospital room, clutching her tiny body and whispering promises I had no idea how to keep. I didn't know then how to be a mother, but I knew I would never leave her. I knew I would give her the life I never had, even if it meant losing parts of myself along the way. And I did. I went back to work 3 weeks after she was born. I couldn't afford to wait. I worked doubles at the diner, my feet swollen, my back aching just to keep the lights on. I remember standing in that cramped kitchen, washing dishes while milk leaked through my uniform, praying she wasn't crying at the sitters. I didn't have a choice. There was no backup. No second income. Just me holding it all together with borrowed strength and barely enough sleep to survive. But every night I came home, picked her up from her little bassinet and held her until she fell asleep. That was all the payment I needed. Her tiny hand gripping my finger, her breath against my collarbone. When she was 5 she needed surgery. Nothing life-threatening but serious enough to send my world spinning. I couldn't afford the copay, so I sold my wedding ring, what little was left of that part of my life, and never told her. I told her it got lost down the drain and I smiled while she comforted me. That ring wasn't worth much money, but it was worth a memory. Still, I traded it without hesitation because her pain mattered more than mine ever would. I skipped meals so she could eat. Skipped sleep so I could make her costumes for school plays. Skipped opportunities so I could be at every practice, every parent-teacher conference, every scraped knee moment. I missed job interviews because she had the flu. I turned down dates because I didn't want to bring confusion into her world. I put her first always, not because I was a martyr but because that's what love looked like to me. Quiet, consistent sacrifice. When she was 16 and crashed the car, I sat through the lecture at the police station, pretending I was furious. I wasn't. I was terrified. I paid the fine and the repairs out of a savings account I had been slowly building for a weekend trip to the beach. One of the only things I had planned just for myself. I canceled the reservation. I told her it wasn't the right time. She never asked again and I never mentioned it. That became a pattern. Me letting go of the things I wanted so she could have the things she needed. There were nights I cried in the dark, not because I regretted any of it, but because I was so tired of being the only one who carried the weight. I never told her how many times I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot, afraid my card would decline. I never told her about the ulcers I got from stress, or the job I lost because I had to leave early when she had a panic attack. I never told her how many times I walked into a room and smiled like nothing was wrong, even though everything inside me was breaking. I thought that's what mothers were supposed to do. Protect, provide, endure. And for years I did it believing she saw me. That even if she didn't understand it yet, one day she would. One day she would look back and see the trail of footprints behind her, each one mine, carved deep into the path she now walks so easily. I didn't need applause. I just wanted acknowledgement. A moment. A word. Something that said, I know what you gave up for me. But that moment never came. Instead, I watched as she grew into a woman who gives her gratitude to someone else. Who shares her stories, her gifts, her joy with another mother figure as if the life we lived together was just a chapter she's closed. It's not that I wanted her to carry my sacrifices like debt. I just wanted them to mean something. I wanted her to look at me and still see her mother. Not the tired woman in the background, but the one who lit the stage in the first place. The hardest part is knowing I gave everything I had. And she doesn't even remember the price. And maybe that's the curse of being the one who never stops giving. People forget you have limits. They forget you bleed too. They forget your silence isn't peace, it's exhaustion. And all the sacrifices you make for love become expected, assumed, invisible. I don't regret loving her the way I did. I just wish she still loved me back with half as much intention. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I wasn't even supposed to be home that afternoon. But I'd forgotten my wallet and doubled back from the market, only to walk in through the back door as their voices floated down the hallway. At first I didn't register the words. I was too focused on moving quietly, thinking I'd surprise her with fresh bread like I used to. But then I heard my name, followed by laughter, and I stopped. My feet froze on the mat, my hand still holding the paper bag, and I listened. She tries so hard, Janet said, her voice light and amused. That little brunch setup. All those cinnamon rolls. Like she's still in charge of something. They laughed. Not just a chuckle. Laughter that rang too loud, too casual, too cruel. She means well, my daughter replied, but it's always a bit too much. You know. Janet sighed. She always needs to feel needed. I get it. But at some point you have to stop playing into it. She doesn't realize things are different now, my daughter added. That we've moved on. My breath caught in my throat. That sentence, the way she said it so plainly, rattled something loose in me. It wasn't anger that surged up. It was disbelief. Not because I didn't think they talked about me, but because I didn't know how easily, how effortlessly they could reduce me to a burden. She still thinks we're close, my daughter said. But it's like, I don't know how to make her see that we've kind of outgrown the whole dynamic. She just needs a hobby, Janet said. Something to take her focus off you. I guess, my daughter replied. I just wish she wouldn't make me feel guilty all the time. It's not like I don't love her. You don't owe her your life, Janet said. She chose to sacrifice. That was her decision. I backed away from the door slowly, the bag still clutched in my hand. My chest felt hollow, my limbs heavy. I didn't cry, not yet. I just stood in the kitchen, stunned, trying to piece together the woman they were talking about and whether or not she was me. Because the version of me they described, the needy, overbearing woman who couldn't let go, wasn't who I believed I was. But to them it was truth. And in that moment my heart broke quietly with no one there to see. I stayed in the kitchen for a while, just breathing. They were still talking now about travel plans and furniture. Normal things. As if they hadn't just taken a scalpel to my heart and peeled back every part of me I thought they appreciated. I left the bread on the counter and slipped out through the back, my presence unnoticed, my pain unseen. On the drive home I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I just sat with the weight of their words. They hadn't meant for me to hear them. But that made it worse. That meant it was real. Honest. Raw. Not sugar-coated for my benefit. And somehow that kind of truth hurts deeper than any argument ever could. I thought about all the times I had held my tongue for her. All the times I'd swallowed my feelings to make room for hers. And here she was, mocking the very things I did to stay connected. She didn't understand that the brunch, the cinnamon rolls, the care, I didn't do those things to cling. I did them to show her I still had something to offer. That even as she built her new life I was still here. Still giving. Still loving. I replayed the tone in her voice, the ease with which she discounted me. It wasn't hateful. That would have been easier. It was dismissive. Casual. Like I was a pair of shoes she'd outgrown but hadn't gotten around to tossing yet. And hearing that tone from the mouth of the girl I had once held through nightmares made me question everything. Had she always felt this way and just never said it? Or had Janet's influence gently redirected her loyalty, drop by drop, until I was no longer the center of her story? When I got home I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the floor. I couldn't bring myself to move. I couldn't even take off my shoes. The betrayal was fresh, raw, pulsing. And for the first time in a long time, I let the silence wrap around me not as a punishment, but as a place to finally let myself fall apart. I cried. Not loud sobs. Not dramatic weeping. Just a slow, steady leaking of grief I didn't know how to name. A grief that had nothing to do with death and everything to do with absence. With being alive and unloved. With being in someone's orbit but no longer their home. Eventually, I wiped my face and looked around my room. Everything was still in its place. Calm, familiar, mine. But something inside me had shifted permanently. The thread had snapped. And I knew without question that I would never see my daughter the same way again. I would never be able to unhear those words, unfeel that dismissal. I still loved her. God, I still loved her. But I had finally heard the truth when no one thought I was listening. And that truth would be the beginning of the end of my silence. I wasn't sure when I decided to confront her. Maybe it was the moment I got home and the silence didn't comfort me the way it used to. Maybe it was when I passed by the fridge and saw the magnet she made in second grade with our picture, her little smile framed in glitter. Maybe it was just the weight of too many moments piling on top of each other, finally too heavy to carry quietly. But one day after work I found myself driving to her house without a plan, without rehearsed words. Just a question throbbing in my chest like a heartbeat. Why? She opened the door with that familiar distracted smile, phone still in hand, earbuds tangled in her sweater. Hey Mom. I wasn't expecting you. I know, I said. She hesitated, sensing something in my voice. Is everything okay? Can we talk? I asked. Just us. She looked behind her as if checking if Sam or Janet was around, then stepped aside. Sure. Come in. The house smelled like vanilla and lemon. Bright and curated. Not a thing out of place. It looked like it belonged to someone else's daughter. A woman perfectly balanced, perfectly controlled. Not the messy, tender girl I raised who once painted the kitchen wall with markers and begged me not to clean it because it was our art. That wall had been repainted. Scrubbed of history. We sat in the living room and for a moment neither of us spoke. She tucked her legs underneath her, polite and poised. I sat with my hands folded in my lap like a guest. I heard you the other day, I said finally. She blinked. Heard me. When I came back to drop off the bread. You and Janet were in the other room. I didn't mean to listen, but... He stiffened. Oh. There was. That one word answer that said everything she didn't want to admit. I heard what you said about me, I continued, my voice calm but trembling underneath. About how I tried too hard. How I haven't realized things have changed. Her face flushed. She opened her mouth, closed it, then said, Mom, that wasn't meant. I know it wasn't meant for me, I cut in gently. That's what makes it worse. She looked down, her fingers knotting in her lap. I took a breath. So I need to ask, why? When did I become something you had to tolerate instead of someone you wanted in your life? She winced. That's not fair. I'm not trying to be fair. I'm trying to understand. Because I've been walking around pretending everything is fine when clearly it's not. And I deserve to know the truth. She looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time in what felt like years I saw conflict in her eyes. Guilt. Shame. Defensiveness. All wrapped together in a tangle she didn't know how to untie. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said softly. But you did, I replied. She nodded. I know. Then why? She sighed. Because it's easier sometimes. To keep you at a distance. To not have to explain things or feel like I'm disappointing you. Because every time I'm around you I feel like I'm not doing enough. I blinked, stunned. I never wanted you to feel that way. I know, she said. But that's how it feels. Like I'm constantly being measured against everything you did. Everything you gave up for me. And I can't live up to it. I can't be that grateful, perfect daughter all the time. I never asked for perfect, I said. I just wanted to feel like I still mattered. You do, she said and then added quickly, but it's different now. Because of Janet? I asked, and the question hung in the air like a sword between us. She looked away. She listens. She doesn't expect anything. That stung. More than I expected. So you mean I expect too much, I said. From you. She hesitated. Sometimes. I nodded slowly. And you think it's because I didn't have anyone else. Because it was just you and me for so long. She didn't answer, but her silence spoke loudly. You think that closeness was a burden, I continued, the truth unraveling in real time. You think I leaned on you too much. That I depended on you to fill the space where everyone else had left. She swallowed hard. Maybe. I don't know. I didn't want to feel responsible for your happiness. I never meant to put that on you, I said. I gave everything I had so you wouldn't have to carry that. I kept things from you so you could be a child. I thought I was protecting you. I know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But as I got older it felt like there was no room to breathe. Like I was always trying to repay a debt I never asked for. Those words broke something in me. Because they were honest. And brutal. And in her eyes maybe even true. I didn't want repayment, I said quietly. I wanted connection. I wanted to be part of your life, not out of guilt but because I'm your mother. Because I thought we had something special. Something worth holding on to. She looked at me then, tears forming. We did. We do. But I don't know how to balance both worlds. You and her. He came into my life when I needed calm and you were still holding so much pain. I didn't know how to hold both. I exhaled slowly, the ache in my chest spreading. So you chose her? No, she said quickly. I didn't choose. I just drifted. And I didn't stop it. The silence that followed was thick. Not angry. Just full of grief neither of us knew how to name. I'm not angry, I said finally. I'm heartbroken. Because I thought I was doing everything right. And maybe I wasn't. Maybe I held on too tight. But it was only because I loved you so much. I know, she whispered. And I'm sorry. We sat there in the living room, two women separated by years of miscommunication and unspoken wounds. And for the first time we weren't pretending. We weren't smiling through the pain or pushing past it. We were sitting in it. Naming it. Facing it. I just needed to ask, I said. Because I couldn't keep carrying this and wondering if I ever really mattered. You did, she said, voice cracking. You still do. It wasn't resolution. It wasn't repair. But it was real. And that was more than I'd had in years. I realized that day something fundamental had shifted within me. I had started to view love as a ledger. A ledger I hadn't agreed to, where my every sacrifice was recorded and weighed against my existence. Even if I hadn't asked for the account. I had given freely, surely, but I never imagined that future love would come with a bill I was too old or too tired to pay. And yet, every time I saw my daughter's expression, guarded, calculating, I felt like she was measuring whether I still qualified for entry into her life. It felt like my love had time-stamped expiration and mine had already passed. She told me in that conversation that she needed space. That she felt overwhelmed by my presence, my memories intertwined with hers, my expectations of closeness. That was a pain I could bear. What I couldn't stand was the idea that I had become a burden. Not because I asked for anything but because I was expected to be everything for everyone and wasn't allowed space to breathe. That expectation had been my cage and now I was the one locked out. I watched the two of them, my daughter and Janet, in her home and realized something else. Love could be conditional even between mother and child and I had never seen it until it was happening to me. She didn't tell me she'd moved on, she showed me. Gave her gifts to another mother. Shared her life with someone who didn't carry the past. Someone who wasn't tied to old regrets and unspoken debts. Someone new. That hurt me more than anything. Because I thought our bond transcended all of that. That it wasn't subject to comparison or influenced by another person's presence. I thought my love had earned me a permanent place in her heart. I was wrong. I've spent nights replaying her words. We love differently now. I'm not the little girl anymore. She listens without judgment. I feel less guilty with her. Those statements, simple as they were, revealed the heart of the wound. I didn't realize forgiveness had strings attached until I was the one entangled. I don't blame my daughter for feeling that way. She's human, she needed space, novelty, relief. She found sanctuary in someone who didn't carry emotional history, someone who didn't ask her to manage anyone else's emotional fallout. She found freedom. What stung was learning that that freedom demanded the removal of me. I started seeing how often love hides rules. You can love me if you stay within my boundaries. You can love me if I feel safe. You can love me so long as you're nothing like your mother. It's a fragile arrangement, conditional love, the kind that shifts with moods and convenience. I reflected on the years I'd poured into her, my sacrifices, my devotion, and realized I had never kept score or demanded payback. I believed that love was enough. I believed that my presence was gift enough. But what they needed wasn't love. It was comfort, convenience, acceptance without effort. A lease with expiration. And I didn't have answers for how to fit into that. Yet I also realized I didn't have to erase myself to remain loved. There's a truth there I'd missed. Love doesn't need you to shrink. It demands you respect your own space as much as you honor theirs. My mistake wasn't loving deeply. It was believing that depth meant losing shape. I reached out to her the following week. Not with questions. Not with demands. With space of my own. I sent a message. No pressure. Just tell me if you want to share a coffee some morning. I left it at that. Quiet, simple, unconditional. Love without ledger. She replied 3 days later. I'd like that. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't full reconciliation. But it felt like a beginning of new terms. I understood something then. Conditional love doesn't have to be an end. It can be an opening to something real. Where love isn't given because of what you carry but because of who you are, space and all. Where relationships hold both presence and absence, clarity and complexity. I didn't expect restitution. I didn't expect miracles. I asked for a chance, to be seen again. Not as the woman who kept score or demanded closeness, but as the mother who learned her daughter's love would change, and that her own love needed to change in return. And in that shift, when love became something not owed or measured, I found a fragile peace. I let go of the expectation that love should be constant. I let go of the fear that absence meant rejection. Because sometimes when love is conditional, you're invited to redefine it, not to reject it. Love can bend without breaking. It can pause without ending. And while it may never return to what it once was, it can still be something worth holding even if it looks different than before. I still loved her. That never changed. But now I loved myself enough to stop chasing the version of her that would never come back. And in that quiet acceptance I felt something I hadn't in a long time, free. I had spent so many years swallowing my pain that I forgot what it felt like to let it out. I had silenced my grief, folded my resentment into polite smiles, and tucked my heartbreak into the corners of rooms where no one would see it. I told myself that was strength, that being the bigger person meant never speaking the full truth. But silence has weight and mine had grown unbearable. The day I sat across from her and let the hurt speak was the day something inside me shifted for good. It didn't come out in an explosion. It wasn't a shouting match. It was quiet, controlled, but piercingly real. I'm tired, I told her. Not just physically. I'm tired of pretending I'm not hurt. I'm tired of showing up for people who don't notice I'm bleeding inside. She didn't say anything at first. Maybe she was shocked to hear that from me. The woman who always held it together, who always had answers, who always let things slide. I had been so committed to not making her feel guilty that I forgot how much it cost me to carry that burden alone. So I stopped carrying it. I told her about the moments I cried in secret. About the times I'd watched her pour affection into someone else and wondered why I didn't deserve the same. I told her I wasn't jealous of Janet. I was heartbroken that she made room for her by shrinking the space she once held for me. I said the words I had rehearsed in my head for months. I know I made mistakes, but I loved you with everything I had. And when I see that love treated like an old coat you've outgrown, it tears me apart. She looked down, eyes shining. I didn't mean to make you feel that way, she said. I didn't know how to talk about it. Then let's talk now, I said. Not with excuses. Not with guilt. Just with honesty. Because I can't keep carrying the silence. We talked. For the first time in years we really talked. She admitted that sometimes she felt overwhelmed by the closeness we once shared. That Janet was easy because there wasn't history. There weren't expectations or old wounds or stories tied to every conversation. With me she felt too much weight, too much memory, too much responsibility. I listened not because it was easy to hear but because I needed to understand the shape of her love now, even if it didn't fit me the way it used to. She said there were times when my love felt like pressure. That every effort I made, every brunch, every call, every well-meant gift, felt like a test she was failing. I hadn't known. I thought I was reaching out in kindness, in habit, in love. But to her, it became something she had to brace herself for. And in that space I let my hurt speak one last time, not to accuse her, not to guilt her, but to free myself. I told her how hard it was to go from being everything to being invisible. How painful it was to watch the woman I raised become a stranger with matching bracelets and private jokes with someone who didn't know the years I'd spent holding her hand through storms. I told her I wasn't asking to be her whole world again. I just wanted to know I still had a place in it. I shared the guilt I'd carried too, the fear that maybe I had overstepped. That maybe I had asked for too much just by loving her as deeply as I did. That maybe I had become too entangled in her life when what she needed was space to find herself. She cried then quietly. And so did I. It wasn't a fix. It didn't erase the years of slow detachment. But it was a turning point. The day I stopped being silent and started being honest. The day I realized that love is not measured by how quietly we endure, but by how bravely we speak the truth, even when our voice shakes. It wasn't easy. The air between us felt heavy, full of everything we had never said. But there was a softness to it too, a gentleness that hadn't been there before. Like we were both tired of pretending and finally ready to meet each other in the raw, unvarnished truth. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip wasn't firm, but it was sincere. "I don't want to lose you," she said. "I just didn't know how to keep you and still be who I'm becoming." That struck me deeply. Because I hadn't seen her evolution as something separate from me. I had always viewed her growth as part of my legacy. But maybe, in order for her to fully become herself, she needed to step out of my shadow. Even if that meant we had to learn each other again, like two people meeting for the second time. I told her I could make space for that. That I could learn to let go of what we used to be in order to build something new. But only if she wanted it too. Only if she saw the value in not just honoring the mother I was, but in seeing the woman I am. She nodded. And for once I believed her. Because we were no longer performing. We were just two women. One learning how to be a daughter again and the other learning how to be more than just a mother. That night I didn't cry when I got home. I didn't replay the conversation 100 times. I just sat on my porch breathing in the quiet. I looked at the sky, the stars blinking back like old friends, and for the first time in a long time I felt a little lighter. Not because everything was fixed. But because the silence had finally been broken. And in its place, something real had begun to grow. In the days following that conversation, I didn't expect much to change. I'd learned over time not to pin my healing on someone else's reaction. I had finally spoken my truth, but I didn't hold my breath for an immediate shift in our dynamic. What I didn't anticipate was the subtle way things began to move. Not all at once, not like a dramatic apology or a grand gesture. But like light slowly seeping through the cracks of a long-closed door. A few days after our talk she called me. Not a text, not a response to something I sent, but a genuine call. Her voice was soft, uncertain at first. She asked if I wanted to come over for dinner the following week. Just me. No one else. It was simple, but it landed in my chest like a gift. I said yes, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to sound too eager. I didn't want to scare the moment away. I arrived that evening with a small bouquet of flowers. Not out of obligation, but because it felt good to bring something. She met me at the door, and for the first time in years she looked at me, not through me, not past me, but directly into me. "You look nice," she said. I thanked her, and we shared a quiet smile that felt like a beginning. The meal wasn't elaborate, pasta, a salad, and a slice of store-bought pie, but it was thoughtful. She asked questions about my week, about the book I was reading, even about a painting class I'd mentioned once but never followed through on. I answered, surprised she remembered. And in that small exchange I felt something thaw. Not entirely, not suddenly. But noticeably. What struck me most wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't do. She didn't flinch when I talked about moments from the past. She didn't change the subject when I mentioned something emotional. She stayed. Present. Kind of. And when the conversation lulled, she didn't rush to fill the space. She let the quiet sit between us without fear. That silence for the first time felt safe. Like a bridge, not a barrier. After dinner we sat on the couch with cups of tea. She curled her legs beneath her the same way she used to when she was a teenager. "I've been thinking about what you said," she offered. I nodded, letting her speak in her own time. "I think I was so focused on becoming who I needed to be in my new life I forgot who I was before," she said. "And you were a big part of that version of me. Maybe too big. Maybe I thought letting go of my childhood meant letting go of you." Her voice cracked slightly. "But I don't want that. I don't want to lose you just because I'm growing up." I didn't cry, even though the words softened something sharp inside me. I just reached for her hand and held it quietly, firmly. "You don't have to lose me," I said. You just have to be willing to let me be part of who you are now, not just who you were. It wasn't a clean fix. There were still gaps between us, still conversations we hadn't had. But that night opened a path. A new way forward. I realized healing wouldn't come in declarations. It would come in moments like these. Mundane, warm, filled with newness and familiarity woven together. In the weeks that followed, things didn't return to how they used to be. They weren't meant to. What we built instead was something that fit who we were now. She began inviting me to smaller parts of her world. A trip to the farmer's market, a morning walk, a phone call just because. I stopped needing grand gestures. I stopped waiting for her to say the perfect thing. I let those tiny gestures matter more. Even Janet became part of the shift. She didn't shrink away or cling tighter. In fact, she softened too. At one gathering, she handed me a plate and said, "She's lucky to have you. I hope she remembers that more often." It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough. And I took it as the olive branch it was. I no longer felt like I was in competition. I realized that maybe there was space for both of us all along. We just hadn't known how to share it. What surprised me most was how I started to see myself differently. I wasn't just the hurt mother. I was a woman who had endured, who had given, and who was still capable of building something new. I started taking the painting class I once mentioned. I picked up books I had left unread. I even went on a weekend retreat with a group of women my age, where we laughed so hard we cried and shared stories that reminded me I wasn't alone. That shift, within me, was perhaps the one I needed most. Love doesn't always return in the form you gave it. Sometimes it comes back reshaped, smaller, quieter, but just as true. And when I looked at my daughter now, I saw her not as the child I lost or the stranger she had become, but as the adult she was trying to be. I stopped asking to be her whole world. I started simply asking to be welcome in it. And that, somehow, was enough. Mother's Day came again as it always did, but this time, something felt different. I didn't wake up bracing for disappointment. I didn't check my phone with that familiar mix of dread and hope. I didn't sit by the window imagining the sound of a car that might not come. I simply got up, made myself a cup of coffee, and let the morning unfold without expectation. That alone felt like a gift. I had spent so many years tying my worth to that one day, to how I was acknowledged, what I was given, who remembered. I had let a holiday become a referendum on my motherhood, a measurement of how loved or forgotten I was. But this year I let go of that. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I had started caring differently. The flowers arrived just after 9 a.m. A simple bouquet of sunflowers and lilacs, with a note in her handwriting. "Thank you for staying when I didn't know how to hold on. Love you." I read it 3 times, each one softer than the last. There was no fanfare. No cruise tickets. No grand jewelry box. Just that note. And somehow, it meant more than anything I had ever received before. Because it was real. It was hers. It wasn't filtered through guilt or obligation. It was a piece of her heart, finally offered without fear. An hour later she called. Not to say she was too busy. Not to make up for something she'd forgotten. Just to talk. "I was thinking we could spend the afternoon together," she said. "Maybe just go for a drive." "No plans." I smiled, holding the phone close. "I'd like that." She picked me up in her car, just the two of us, like we used to do before life got so complicated. We drove without a destination, windows down, soft music playing. She told me about her week, about work, about Sam, about a book she'd started. I listened, not as someone desperate to be included, but as someone invited back in. We stopped at a little roadside cafe we'd never noticed before. Nothing fancy. Wooden chairs, chipped mugs, laughter from the other tables. She reached across the table as we waited for our drinks and said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to get here." I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. "I'm just glad you came back," I said. And I meant it. We talked for hours, the kind of talking that isn't about big revelations but about rebuilding rhythm. I told her about the painting class I'd been loving. She told me about how she'd started journaling again. We laughed about things from the past, the kind of laughter that doesn't hurt anymore because the wounds had started to close. At one point she reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. "I didn't want to make a big deal out of today," she said. "But I saw this and thought of you." Inside was a necklace. Nothing extravagant, just a silver chain with a tiny charm shaped like a sunflower. "You used to say they reminded you of strength," she added. I touched the charm, light and familiar. "They still do," I said. I wore it home. I didn't take it off that night. I still haven't. When I got home that evening, I sat in the quiet and let it all sink in. The shift hadn't been sudden. It had been growing quietly for weeks, maybe months, like the slow thaw after a long winter. What made this Mother's Day different wasn't what I received. It was what I no longer needed. I didn't need to be the center of attention. I didn't need to be showered with proof. I just needed to feel seen. And I did. I thought about the years I had spent aching for her to notice me again. About the distance, the silence, the heartbreak. I thought about Janet, about the way things had changed so quickly I didn't know how to keep up. And then I thought about now. This quiet re-entry into her life. This soft, sincere return. It wasn't everything I'd once imagined, but it was enough. Maybe even better. That night I took out an old photo album. Not to grieve what had been, but to remember it with gentleness. I flipped through pages of birthdays, messy hair, tiny hands covered in paint. I lingered on a photo of her at 6, beaming with 2 missing teeth, her arms wrapped tightly around my neck. I smiled. Not with sadness this time, but with gratitude. Because no matter how far we drifted, that love had been real. And it still lived in both of us, even if we had to find our way back to it. Later I sat down and wrote her a letter. I didn't know if I would send it. I just needed to put the words somewhere. You broke my heart, I wrote. But you also gave it a reason to keep beating. Watching you love someone else taught me how deep my love really was. And forgiving you showed me how strong I had become. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and left it there. It didn't need to be sent. Some things are just meant to be said to ourselves. This Mother's Day didn't come with applause or a public post. It came with quiet grace. It came with small gestures, with shared laughter, with mutual understanding. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was reaching across a canyon. I felt like we were sitting on the same side. I know there will still be distance sometimes. There will be days she forgets to call, moments where life pulls us apart again. But now I believe we'll find our way back, not out of guilt but out of choice. That's the kind of love I've always wanted. Not perfect. Not loud. Just chosen. Just true.